Hi there, it's Polly here. So, it's not often that Snoots and I find a miniatures game that is exciting, and yeah, I found one. He does the happy dance. He's in winter mode, so am I. Explaining my fuzzy attire. So, slight caveat, a friend sent this to me for review, and I want to thank them very much because this is a fabulous game. I have touched on an earlier version of this before. This is a second edition of Pulp Alley. Brilliant work. First off, you can see paperback, digest sized. This is the core set of rules. The game itself is very well served online at their own website. All details in here, for several pre-done adventures and pre-done campaigns, strings of adventures that all tie in together. The game is driven also by card sets. You can buy card sets and supplements. This one is a solo deck, which we're going to touch on later, because the game can be played solo, which I love, really love. So this is based in the pulp adventure genre of sort of the 30s, 40s and 50s specifically. You know the sort of thing. Doc Savage, Man of Bronze. The Shadow knows. Sinister Adventures of Fu Manchu. Original Buck Rogers. Original Flash Gordon. All these sorts of things. They are two-fist adventures with many perils, and they have a really cool little set of story structures, and you know how it goes. So I guess the first things first is this is a skirmish game, and I love a good skirmish game. A skirmish game to work has to have rules that are simple to learn and teach, that are engaging, so they have to have some nuance and cleverness to how they're used, and have to sort of have enough hooks to make you think and want to dive into the game world and see what you can do with this. This has all of these things. You are going to make a league. Now, a league has 10 slots. Slots are used to buy character levels. Each league comes with a leader for free, and you've got 10 slots. Characters have different levels. A level 4 character is a leader. You can only have one of those. They're obviously very competent. A level 3 character is a sidekick. You get, what's the next one down? Colleagues, I think. No, allies, which are level 2. Competent, but nothing to write home about. And you also get followers, which are level 1. You can also have a gang, which is a sort of a special type of level 1 follower. Now, all of these are a single figure, except for a gang, which is normally 5 figures. And as it takes damage, everyone else will remove basically dice steps from themselves as they take damage. Gangs will remove figures. But you sit there first and you will decide on the composition of your league. So, as you can see, if I took, I have a leader, I've got 10 slots. Even if I just took 10 low-level minions, they're all followers, I'm only being expected to provide 10 figures. You probably won't though, because you'll probably want associates or something. You're going to need 5 because they're better. But you could go completely nuts and say, I'm going to have 10 gangs. I am going to snow these guys down with numbers. Even then it's just 50, which, if they're a bunch of gun-toting maniacs, or your mind-controlled cavemen, or the leopards that your whip-wielding Amazon women are going to, drive forward into battle, still pretty easy to provide and pretty fun to do. So you're never going to be expected to do much. Now again, these guys' website has an extensive list of figures that you can buy. But you can also get figures for this kind of period from manufacturers like Cobblestone. It's also worth looking on a lot of English manufacturers' sites, because often they have 1930s adventures, Cthulhu adventures, they'll have brush wars, bush wars, unknown wars. They'll have Russian Revolution figures, and you can find a plethora of figures of like Nazis with jetpacks, or World War One Zeppelin troops, or dinosaur hunters stealing each other's bones and taking pot shots at each other, or enraged yetis, or you can find a ton of cool things. So what you've got is, you've got your characters and they have different abilities. Now what are they? There's your brawl, shoot, dodge, might, finesse and cunning. These are different characteristics. Each of these is expressed as a number of dice and a type of dice. So you split up a set number of dice, and in the case of the so a leader, you start with 4 of these at 3 dice, 2 of them at 2 dice, and 4 of these will be d10s and 2 of these will be at d8. So you get to mix and match. Do I want the skills that I've got lower numbers of dice, do I want them to be a higher dice type so that they've still got a pretty good chance of making them happen? Or do I want to really max out on something? Because what's happening when you are rolling to see if a skill succeeds, you roll that set number of dice and 4 or higher is going to hit. So obviously a d10 has a pretty substantial chance of hitting, a d6 50-50. As you get penalties and bonuses, so for instance if someone is in cover or if someone is a fast moving target, you will lose dice. That's how the shot difficulty or whatever will be done. If you've got bonuses that make things easier, you'll gain extra dice of the type of dice you've chosen. So if my guy has 4d10 for his shoot skill, because I'm a maniac and just like gunning things down, and I'm firing at someone that's in cover, I'll lose 1 dice to do it, so I'll only be rolling 3 dice. Each hit you get on someone will deal damage. Damage usually reduces you down by 1 dice step for your health. And when that goes below d6, that character is down. They are, you tip the figure over or put a marker next to it, they are now basically bowled over, knocked unconscious. You then roll to see if they are out. You can be down or you can be down and out. On the next turn, you roll to see if they recover. They're doing a health check again. They're rolling a dice, trying to get that 4 or higher, same number every time. They're not going to confuse you with new numbers. If you make it, then you are brought back up to 1d6 dice and can continue to move around and play. If you fail, that's it, you're out. Sure, you might be dead. Probably not. This is Pulp Fiction, so normally you're down. Tis you've passed out from the shock. You've been dragged off by your buddies. You fell down the elevator shaft only to magically reappear again. What have you? So, and if it is a gang, it does lose 1 figure, so they can whittle away to nothing that way. So the next layer of complexity, and this is where a lot of the fun comes from after juggling this around, is picking the powers. Now, a league gets league powers, set things that set it apart, and they are very, very thematic. So let us say you want a sinister cult of Cthulhu worshippers. There are kind of cult-based powers that you can choose, and some of them riff off character powers. More on those later. So there are great ones for building up themes. Your individual characters also have powers that they can choose. So yeah, you get 3 for a leader, 2 for a sidekick. You get 1 for allies and followers. And there is a considerable chart of these things, and they are divided into different power levels, and you can only have some at set level. So yeah, leader, you can have 3 abilities and you can choose any from the list for 1 to 4, but for followers or gangs you can only choose level 1 powers and a single level 1 power. But some of these are quite interesting and do cascade over into other things. So for instance, if you chose animal or beast as a power, it will say your character no longer has a shooting skill, it can't shoot at range. immediately increase your brawling skill by this much. You can't do actions. There are some things which you need an action to trigger off, like turning a switch, opening a door, turning on the aircraft, firing the torpedo from the submarine. These sorts of things are actions. You can't do that. It's an animal. But your health goes up, your close combat goes up, and these sorts of things. So you do get a cascade of cool abilities that come with that. So, there's some interesting things. There are some skills at the high levels, again, which riff off the low ones. So let us say you wish to do like a sinister cult leader. You can have things that inspire fanatical loyalties and powers within your followers. And if they've got certain other powers, your guy utilizing this makes those powers work better. So you can build a really nicely themed evil or good or neutral league. What do you want to do? Anything you want to do. If you want Doc Savage's bunch of freedom fighters, if you want, if you want to do Buckaroo Banzai's amazing gang, you can do that. You can have these wild, eclectic guys each together. Here's our feisty engineer. Here's our massive two-fisted leader. Here's our incredibly intelligent scientist who's very, very fragile in combat, but he's really good at solving problems, and so on. And problems is another thing we'll get into, because this isn't just about combat. So anyway, you can also get gear points, and you use those to purchase gear. Unless you have chosen powers or chosen to take something that does not shoot, everyone's presumed to be able to fire at range, but you can take gear that increases those shooting powers. So if you've specifically said, I have bought a shotgun, I have used my gear, and this guy's got a shotgun, it has shotgun effects, which will be like, it'll probably give it a burst at certain ranges. You'll actually put a little cone down, anyone in there gets hit. Same goes for like Tommy guns and things like that. Or a rifle, it'll just say, you ignore range penalties out to a certain range, you bought a rifle. The game, by the way, is always played on a 3-foot square table, so it's pretty tight as far as space goes. You're not roaming around. Obviously, you could play it on a bigger game table, but it's designed for a 3x3. As groups play through scenarios, what happens is a scenario is laid out with terrain, and again, the terrain for this will be hilarious. Clearly, it will vary depending on the campaign that you've got in mind. But if you're doing a series of campaigns where they are going through the amazing frozen underground city of the Shoggoths under the South Pole, great, get some polystyrene, get some white sheets. You can make your caves, your caverns, your glaciers, your frozen lakes. You can make your cyclopean cities. You could make a maze for them to run around in. You can do all this. If it's a jungle, fantastic. Out come your plants, out comes the lichen, out comes the green tablecloth. But remember, this is all pulp. And this is the thing, there are different setting guidelines to this, so you could get some quite good terrain in there. They give you guidelines for different styles of pulp. So one of them is science fiction. Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, these sorts of things. Here are the sort of powers and gear and so on and special lists that work in this particular setting. Here are some special rules for this setting. So obviously out come the aquarium plants, or make your cool science fiction buildings. Bring out your really cool Draenei from Stargard to use as your ant minions. Do all that things. You can go to town. There is a company called Hydra Miniatures. They do some fantastic space Valkyries and Evil Ming the Merciless miniatures and this sort of stuff. So conical three-eyed aliens with tentacles, all this sort of stuff. So it's all out there, folks. But there's also like detective pulp, or there's war story pulp. They've got all these different guidelines for different styles if you want to do that sort of thing. Cavemen, adventures in lost worlds, all this sort of stuff. So again, you can make this game your own in all kinds of ways. As you do things in the game, you gain experience, and so you can gain more powers and more gear and more powers for the League, and leagues can actually start to be invited into secret societies if they're doing well. There are different secret societies that sort of give them cool stuff. When you set up a game, you put down essentially some objectives on the game, some things. So, for instance, if our scenario basically says we've got to get into that ancient Shoggoth city and we've got to save the sweet young thing who was seized by the Shoggoth and has been brought to the altar, and you know, the evil blubbery lord is going to rise and eat her unless you guys can get her off. However, to get to that, you might have a umpire lay out a table, or you can just decide to do it. There are rules for just making these things, but there are objectives, and some of these might be, okay, so there are different objectives here that are minor objectives. There's a major one. Each of these gets you something. At the end, victory is determined by who got the most number of these objectives in their hand. There might be prisoners that you're rescuing, there might be equipment that you're recovering, there might be giant squitches that you're throwing to deactivate the giant death ray. It might be recovering vials of, you know, terrible poison or disease that the evil Ming the Merciless is going to use to poison off this planet. It could be plucking strange rare flowers that, you know, the headquarters needs for their research. There are also areas that are marked as being perilous, and they can be perilous in different ways. It can be taken that this is a perilous chunk of jungle. We're playing a Lost World. Hell, there's velociraptors out there, baby. Or this is a mountainous area where avalanches are coming, or where ice fissures can open. You don't have to be all that specific about the perils. But you do put down these perilous areas. Now, during the course of a game, what happens is someone is nominated as the director. Initially, you just kind of roll off for it. But during the course of play, if someone decisively wins a combat or seizes one of these objectives, they get the director's hat. This means that during a turn, what happens is the director decides who moves what characters in order. So the director gets to essentially look at a character that hasn't moved and move it, and then they are the one that is really guiding the action. They've got the initiative. They figure out the order people move in. But that can be swiped off them. If characters move and are in contact, then that's it for them. So if you haven't moved yet and someone moves into you, you are locked in combat, and your first action has to be either to continue that combat or to try and disengage, which there are very simple rules, etc. If you're shooting at someone, you are rolling those dice. Force a higher or always a hit. There are bonuses and penalties depending on whether, like, you are moving. These things, you can be riding around in vehicles, so it can be harder to hit if you're jouncing around in a vehicle. Other guy could be in cover, etc. So you'll add or subtract dice, looking for 4s or higher. Each hit you get will do essentially a dice level of damage to your target. Brawling is done sort of as a contested roll. You both roll and see who gets the highest. So you can bash away at each other with fisticuffs. When you enter these perilous areas, you will have to check for the peril, and that's where these cards come in. Because these cards have got many different aspects to them. So you can see they've actually got a few different layers to them. They've got numbers and so on. The bottom, they've got a challenge. If you have a character move into a perilous area, they must face a challenge. You draw one of these cards and it will say the challenge this person has to face will be a challenge to their cunning. Right. The velociraptors are there, but to get past them, you've got to sort of like distract them, decoy them, whatever. You know, would be an interpretation of that. Or, yes, it's you're going through the giant alien machine and sparks are going off, so someone's cunning, they've got to figure out how to shut this thing off as they move through. Whatever works well for the narrative. So you can randomize it with this, and it's got the number of the peril. You've got to get hits exceeding the value of the peril in order to get through without taking damage. The difference between what the number of successes you've got and the peril level is how much damage you're going to take. So having things that aren't just combat-oriented characteristics is very important. Obviously, a designed scenario can have very specific perils at different places, but for just sitting down with someone, you've got randomized perils. There are also random effects here. At the start of turns, the director draws cards and it will give you things that are going on during this turn. So there is a constant flow of random events happening throughout the game as these cards are turned over. So it's a nice system. You ideally will be playing like a series of these things which will link together into long ongoing battles. You can have multiple players on a side. You can have multiple people who are all, striving to get to those things first. So this isn't just a one-on-one. You can play this with many people on the table at once, all striving to see who gets to be the director, all turning over these random event cards. It can be enormous fun building a really cool themed league, having a good think about what powers are going to riff off each other and what your theme is going to be. Are you going to try swamping people with those gangs? Are you just going to be doing things? And there are some cool ideas that you can do. So there are amongst the options that you can do. One of those is you can just say duo. Well, Batman and Robin. I'm going to take just a duo. I don't get any extra slots, but I get 2 leader level characters and they get some extra bits and pieces. So I don't get gangs or whatever. So you can literally have a pair of tough crime fighters there side by side battling their way through, the Joker's minions or what have you. So, there are many, many little options that you can do. Or you can say, no leaders on this one. You get some extras and extra slots and bits and pieces, but there's no leader. It's a mighty communist league. And as you start getting into these secret societies, you get some more interesting powers, more riffs. I really like this as an idea. It's quite an exciting, it's just a very exciting skirmish game. That simple moving the dice up and down by number for difficulty or ease of task, and damage is lowering the dice type. And when you get to below 6, that's it. Your character is sort of down, rolls either down and out. Lovely. This solo deck has got things in it that essentially run the op force for you. So their solo rules basically say that characters will home into try and attack the nearest of your force that they can see and so on. But as they move, each time they activate, you're pulling one of these out, which gives you some additional things that they are doing. They might be, it might give them some extra actions. It might make them not go for the nearest guy, but refocus on moving across to concentrate on one of the flanks. Or it keeps you guessing, and that's the problem with the solo game. You've got to keep them guessing. A card deck that keeps providing tactical guidance as well as random events for that solo opposition force. Great idea. I've looked through some of their campaigns they've done. They've got some really cool ones, like for instance there's the Lost Island of Lemuria, where it goes from everywhere from wandering through jungles and fighting your way through away from shipwrecks and so on, to the inevitable lost cities in the jungle, to the dread inhabited cities where there's the evil overlords and savage machines guarding them and these sorts of things. So you could run things where people have gone back through time and you're fighting dinosaurs. Hell, you could do a league that is the dinosaurs. There's just the dinosaurs living around here. They're not that coherent, but by damn they're hungry and they're all beasts. Or you could do the cavemen. There's some really good cavemen figures out. So this is a great game. I'm so tempted to do up a force of pulp sci-fi people. I love those Hydra miniatures, Valkyries, and they've also got like the Space Force, complete with chimp in a spacesuit, the plucky kid, the comedy relief robot, Inspector Poindexter, or the scientist, and all these classic sort of characters that you could make your amazing motley space crew out of, or the giant death ray with crew from the evil Emperor's forces, along with his sadistic princess and the sinister Emperor himself. Great stuff. And there are some aquarium plants, your best friend for fun crap, pulp, science fiction terrain. Neon pink aquarium plants and whatever, fantastic. So look, if you want to do basically a pretty low cost but enormously good fun skirmish game that runs on this concept of that kind of, again, 1930s, 40s, 50s pulp adventure genre, these are brilliant, a brilliant set of rules. They're nicely illustrated with like little catchphrases and so on. So you've got like the evil doctor, a good figure that's saying this is, "You have interfered with my plans for the last time." These sorts of these are all moments that you're going to get in playing. I think it's a terrific effort. I'm really, really, really keen to actually get some stuff and play this. Yeah, look, Mr. Snoots and I can go solo. He'll play. He'll do well. He'll run the op for us, and we can do that. So yeah, Barsoom is another one. There's some good Barsoom miniatures out. Hey, that would be pretty cool as well. Yeah. Anyway, so you see what I mean. You can do anything you want. Go and take a look at them. They are well supported online with decks and deck supplements and pre-done adventures and campaigns galore. This new set here, this second edition, what it does is it takes what had been built through a basic set of rules and then an advanced set of rules and a couple of supplements. It brings that all together under one cover into one coherent whole, smoothing out any of the lumps that came from having systems that overwrote each other and so on. So this is the cleaned up, snazzy biffo version, and yeah, I love it. Fantastic stuff. The moment I finished reading these, I immediately sat down to watch Tales of the Gold Monkey and Doc Savage, unsung giants of the television age, both of them. Anyway, look after yourselves, everybody. I know it's really tough times for people in the LGBTQ community out there in raging hellholes like the USA and the UK. Look after your personal safety. Look after your morale. Remember, you are not alone. There are people who are working very hard to turn this around. And as I've said before, in Australia, we are your citadel. We are winning these rights. And yeah, we can springboard from here and win them back for you as well. Never despair. We've always been here and we always will. Much love to all of you. Take care of yourselves, and remember, when in doubt, lose yourself in the pure fun of a game. You want to turn that off? He wants to turn it off. Okay.